Thanks for joining us here on the CBN News Channel. I'm Ephraim Graham. The violence in Cairo is increasing today. At least 40 people died and more than 300 are wounded in clashes outside a military building where supporters of Mohamed Morsi gathered to protest. There are conflicting reports about whether gunmen fired on Egyptian troops or if the soldiers opened fire first. This comes after millions of Egyptians took to the streets again on Sunday to show their support for the new interim government. Our Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell is in Cairo. He reports that many are concerned about the role the Obama administration played in the Morsi government.
Whether it was Tahrir Square or outside Cairo's presidential palace, millions of Egyptians stood behind what they call their new revolution. This is one of the many anti-Morsi demonstrations taking place throughout Egypt. Demonstrators here are upset with the Obama administration for what they say is their support for the Muslim Brotherhood. The demonstrations prominently displayed signs saying U.S. President Obama supports terrorism. He also carried signs criticizing the role of U.S. Ambassador to Egypt, Ann Patterson. They feel she and the Obama administration gave legitimacy to the Muslim Brotherhood, what they see now as a terrorist group. Michael Munir of the U.S. Coptic Association says for 2 years, the Obama administration marginalized secular leaders, moderate Muslims and Christians, while propping up Islamists.
Throughout these two years, Ann Patterson would not meet with secular leaders as much as she met with Islamists and Salafis and jihadists. And she propped them in American media and made them look like they're political operatives.
Munir and others feel the Obama administration helped Morsi maintain his power. Former Israeli ambassador to Egypt, Zvi Mazel, can't understand the U.S. support for the Muslim Brotherhood.
Something went wrong, to my humble opinion, in the White House. They just did not understand what was happening in the Middle East and especially in Egypt. And then they gave their support to the Muslim brothers.
Many hit the streets because they feared since his election 1 year ago, Morsi and the Muslim Brotherhood were using democracy to establish a dictatorship.
He became like a god. We took to the streets just to protest against this decree and saying that you will not be a dictator and this country is free.
Mohammed Suleiman is one of the young activists behind the protest. Suleiman says the Muslim Brotherhood failed to provide even the basics.
This government was disastrous. They couldn't manage the country. They couldn't provide us with the basic needs for life, bread, water.
Many Egyptians feared their country without a change would become like Iran, an Islamic theocracy. The leaders behind this revolution insist it's not a coup, but a popular uprising.
How could that be a coup? We organized this 4 months ago. We told the people to go and sign petitions to impeach Morsi.
Despite the millions in the streets supporting the new government, the Muslim Brotherhood vows it will continue to fight.
Will continue uplifting the pressure, and it will increase the pressure on the SCAF Council and the military coup dictatorship until they recede and reinstall President Morsi back to his rightful seat.
No one can predict what will happen next, but the recent violence is one sign there may be a long, hard road ahead for Egypt. That's why many Christians here are asking for prayer for the Arab world's most strategic nation. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Cairo, Egypt.
The Muslim Brotherhood is a well-known and powerful force throughout the Islamic world. In recent years, it's turned its attention to America and communities here that are ripe for its radical agenda. Eric Stakelback recently sat down with 2 American Muslims familiar with the Brotherhood's tactics inside the United States.
Dr. Ahmed Mansour watched for years as the Muslim Brotherhood slowly laid the groundwork to seize power in his home country of Egypt. Now living in America, he worries that the Brotherhood will follow a similar playbook here.
They are, working the American community here to make it as fifth column. They wanted to take over any place they are in.
Mansour taught at Cairo's famed Al-Azhar University, where he saw the Muslim Brotherhood's ideology up close.
They believe that the world is divided into 2 camps. The camp of believers, that's their camp, and the camp of disbeliever, of the camp of war. And they have the religious duty to war the another camp.
Mansour founded the Quranist movement to present a more moderate interpretation of Islam. Over the years, it led to his imprisonment and harassment in Egypt. He was finally forced to leave the country in 2001 after speaking out against the likes of the Brotherhood.
Talk about the Muslim Brotherhood's tactics, their deception, and why they are so dangerous.
They are very cunning. They usually use two faces. They have two discourses. Discourse among them against all the people. And discourse is a very beautiful discourse for all the non-Muslim brothers.
CBN News recently sat down with another concerned Muslim who says followers of the Muslim Brotherhood have taken over mosques in the Boston area. We've disguised his face and voice for his safety.
They want to go after the young minds. And the way they go after the young minds is either they start scholarships in high schools, they bring them to a certain level of obedience. It is called tarbiyah, they have classes for them and so on.
He says once you're a Muslim brother, you're in for life.
When some young chap is ready to take the oath, he is given an oath so that he will never leave the organization and they will do anything.
He says the Brotherhood also operates on Boston area college campuses. Dr. Mansour, for one, is not surprised. He was shocked when he arrived in America and found that radicals controlled many of the mosques he visited, even in the Washington, D.C. area.
I escaped from them in Egypt and found them here. So I said to myself, oh, where can I go? To go to the moon?
The Brotherhood's influence reportedly stretches beyond the local level. There have been reports in Egyptian media that Muslim Brotherhood operatives have influence in the Obama administration when it comes to counterterrorism and Mideast policymaking. As for Dr. Mansour, he says he can't get any backing from U.S. government agencies for his anti-jihad message. Eric Stakelbeck, CBN News, Washington.
Cuba's president is standing behind the man wanted for leaking information about America's surveillance programs. Raul Castro is offering support for Venezuela and other Latin American governments willing to give Edward Snowden asylum. Snowden has been stuck at Moscow's airport for nearly 2 weeks. Venezuela's president has already offered him asylum. The presidents of Nicaragua and Bolivia have suggested they're also willing to do that. U.S. leaders warn any country giving sanctuary to Snowden could face economic and trade sanctions. Investigators are deep into the search for clues in the crash of a Boeing 777 at San Francisco's airport this weekend. 2 people were killed and more than 160 injured. 49 of those remain in serious condition. Today, we're learning more about the pilot as well as the victims. Asiana Flight 214 was coming in much too slow for a landing. Investigators say crew members cried out for increased speed, but it was too late. The plane stalled just as the pilots tried to abort the landing.
A call to initiate a go-around occurred 1.5 seconds before impact.
According to new information, the pilot in the deadly crash was in training, having logged only 43 hours of experience flying a Boeing 777. An Asia spokeswoman said the pilot was flying with a very experienced co-pilot and had thousands of hours of experience flying other aircraft. Meanwhile, doctors at San Francisco General Hospital continue to work around the clock to save the injured.
Most critically injured people came right away. Some of them had burns, they had fractures, internal bleeding, head injuries, spinal injuries.
Passengers sitting in the back of the plane were hurt the worst. Among them, 35 middle and high school students from China on their way to learn English at a Christian church and school in Southern California. Both of the victims were from that group.
I knew that there was some connection to the airplane, but I didn't realize that the 2 of the deaths had been from the children that we were hosting. And I have 3 children, and it just struck me as a mom to think about sending my children off on a wonderful, what was to be a pleasurable trip, and to have something like that happen.
The National Transportation Safety Board plans to speak with the pilots in the coming days in an investigation that could take months. Officials are also investigating reports that one of the teenage victims may have been struck by a rescue vehicle on the runway. Women seeking abortions in Wisconsin will have to undergo an ultrasound first. Governor Scott Walker signed a new law Friday that will require it. The law also bans doctors from performing abortions unless they have admitting privileges at a nearby hospital. The new law takes effect today. But Planned Parenthood and the American Civil Liberties Union have filed a federal lawsuit, and they're asking for a temporary restraining order. They claim the bill is unconstitutional. Coming up, novelist Ayn Rand rejected God and religion, but some Christians say her writings reflect biblical principles. Meet one believer who's trying to reconcile the Bible and Atlas Shrugged.
Hello? Is this thing on? Hey, kids, do you love games? And do you love discovering things? Well, do ya?
Then you're gonna love this. It's the new free Superbook Kids Bible app. You can play games, watch videos, find answers to your questions, and a whole lot more. The new Superbook Kids Bible app. Free downloads available on iTunes now.
A federal database meant to help catch criminals is being used by crooked police officers to commit crimes of their own. Federal cases have revealed abuse around the country in recent years, but 2 current trials reveal a lot of misuse in New York City. Testimony against 2 accused police officers there suggests officers can easily bypass safeguards by simply using another officer's login information. The National Crime Information Center database is used nationwide by 90,000 agencies. They access it about 9 million times a day. Well, there is only one book that outsells Ayn Rand's Atlas Shrugged, and that's the Bible. Now, a Christian who's also a Rand disciple is trying to bring the Bible and Atlas Shrugged together. Though Rand was a fanatic atheist, she was a fierce believer in liberty, limited government, and the free market, all things conservative Christians love as well. Our Paul Strand talked to this believer in both Rand and Jesus.
We're speaking with Mark David Henderson, the author of The Soul of Atlas. Mark, basically, you are a Christian, but also you believe in the teachings of Ayn Rand. Is that true, the woman who wrote Atlas Shrugged?
Yeah, I grew up with 2 fathers that raised me from different perspectives. My biological father is a Christian, my stepfather is an atheist and a follower of Ayn Rand. So I really combine those kind of things.
And now what are you trying to do with this book, The Soul of Atlas? Are you trying to bring the 2 philosophies together somehow?
Well, the subtitle says Ayn Rand, Christianity, A Quest for Common Ground, and that's really what I'm trying to find, is common ground, things that both worldviews hold very dear and value.
Mm-hmm. Now, the main problem is that Rand was an atheist, right? And I mean, she was somewhat of an enemy of Christianity?
She said she wanted to be known as the greatest champion of reason, the greatest enemy of religion. So yeah, the existence of God is really off the table for her.
Mm-hmm. But yet, what, as you think about it, is it the economic philosophy? What are some of the areas where you find some common ground for a lot of Christians in America today and Rand's philosophy?
Well, you know, there are some philosophical common ground areas, like objective truth and the capacity of man to reason that sets us apart from the animals. But the limited government perspective that Ayn Rand had and the espousing of capitalism as an economic system, that's where I think we find a lot of common ground with conservative Christians today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was going to say, and your stepdad, who is the producer of the Atlas Shrugged movies, he's called for the 2 groups to start to work together, hasn't he?
He has, and you know, between my 2 fathers that raised me, you know, I was just trying to bring them together, really to not just to engage with them, but to understand where they're coming from and then find that common ground so that we can act together. And that's what John Aguilera is really trying to do, is to bring those 2 together so we can accomplish more together than we could ever separately.
John, your stepfather there. And now the thing is that I guess what we can say is that today that much of liberal philosophy is sort of an enemy to both Christianity and the kind of conservatism and capitalism espoused by Rand. Is that true?
I think that's true, and I think, you know, individual liberty is really at stake. The government is overreaching its rightful role, and I think that Christians and objectivists from a different foundation can agree with that very practical, ethical ground or sort of results of that thinking.
Do you see, are there famous people today in politics that that we know of that are Christians that are also believers in Rand's philosophy? Guys that we might recognize right on Capitol Hill today.
Well, you know, I think Paul Ryan is sort of the obvious, and he's got a long history with Ayn Rand. I think Rand Paul as well. So I think, yes, there are people who believe that there's common ground, don't necessarily agree with everything on either side, but it's not an all or nothing thing.
Yeah, and Rand Paul, in fact, his name,
he said, is not actually after Ayn Rand.
Oh, it's not.
But there was a YouTube video where he dispels that. But nevertheless, it's given a lot of Ayn Rand enthusiasts reason to sit up and cheer.
His famous father, Ron Paul, a big backer of Rand, isn't he?
He's, he's really well aligned with all of the things that she said, not necessarily per se. But that's why he has a lot of fans among the objectivist and secular libertarian community.
Are you getting good reactions from people on both sides?
Yes. In fact, the most encouraging thing for me is that some of the myths and misunderstandings about Christianity that objectivists have, Ayn Rand philosophy enthusiasts have, are being dispelled, and vice versa. So I think that's a win as long as we can continue to engage and ultimately get to a place where we can accomplish more together.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We've been talking with Mark David Henderson, the author of The Soul of Atlas.
Up next, a real shocker. Now doctors are saying cholesterol is good for you, and people with high cholesterol live longer. Health reporter Lori Johnson joins us with the latest research. Cholesterol has been public health enemy #1 for decades, but now research shows that high cholesterol is actually a good thing. So what is the deal? Health reporter Lori Johnson brings us the latest findings about fat.
20 years ago, doctors told us to stay away from high-fat foods like butter, cheese, bacon, and eggs because they raised cholesterol and could lead to heart disease. America responded and stopped eating fat. In its place, however, we ate more sugar and other carbohydrates. And how'd that work out? Not great. As a whole, Americans grew fatter and sicker than before. It looks like back then, scientists may have reached the wrong conclusion. A growing number of medical experts now say things like weight gain, heart disease, and other illnesses are not caused by cholesterol, but by something different called inflammation. That means instead of avoiding foods that raise our cholesterol, we need to avoid foods that cause inflammation. Dr. Beverly Teeter studies how different kinds of fat in food affect our health. She says scientists wrongly blamed cholesterol for heart disease when they saw high levels of it in damaged blood vessels. Teeter believes the body put the cholesterol there to fix the problem, which was actually caused by something else, inflammation.
It's the inflammation in the vessels that start the lesion. The body then sends the cholesterol like a scab to cover over it and protect the blood system and that vessel wall from further damage.
Research also shows cholesterol can protect against respiratory and gastrointestinal problems, helps create vitamin D, and people with high cholesterol tend to live longer.
I come from a family that my mother's side had naturally high cholesterol. Her cholesterol was between 380 and 420 when I started watching her medical records, and she died at 97. So I don't think that cholesterol was too bad for her.
It's also especially important in the brain, which contains more cholesterol than any other organ and needs cholesterol in order for brain cells to pass messages to each other. So when it comes to food choices, Dr. Teeter says don't worry if it raises your cholesterol. Focus your attention on reducing inflammation with omega-3s and natural saturated fats. Some fats, however, cause inflammation, so avoid too many omega-6s and trans fats. How do you tell the healthy omega-3s from the unhealthy omega-6 fats? Vegetable oils and mayonnaise contain high levels of omega-6s, so be careful how much you consume. As far as omega-3s, such as fish, olive oil, and walnuts, take an extra helping or a daily fish oil supplement. At one time, dietitians considered margarine, a trans fat, heart-healthy. We now know a better choice is butter. In the last 20 years, trans fats have become the ingredient of choice for almost all processed foods. You can tell something contains trans fat if you see the word hydrogenated in the list of ingredients. Natural saturated fats can also cut down on inflammation. Topping the list, coconut oil, which fights colds and the flu and has even reversed the symptoms of Alzheimer's, ALS, and Parkinson's disease in some people. Now that you know some of the good about fats, you should also remember those foods that make you fat and increase inflammation. On that list, it's hard to top sugar and other refined carbohydrates, wheat, corn, rice, and so on. So when it comes to your health, inflammation beats out cholesterol as the new enemy. Take it on by saying yes to foods like fish and coconut oil and no to sugar, other carbs, and trans fats. Lori Johnson, CBN News.
All right, we'll be right back. Stay with us. Well, finally today, Operation Blessing is playing a role in the opening of an important new teaching hospital in Haiti. It's created by Partners in Health. It will provide primary care to about 185,000 people in the area. Operation Blessing drilled 5 water wells, including the primary hospital well, and 2 community wells for public use. OB also brought about a donation of a water disinfectant and filtration system for the hospital. Doing great work. Well, that is going to do it for this edition of the CBN News Channel. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about at cbnnews.com. And tell us what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Have a marvelous Monday, everybody.
Introducing the CBN Bible from CBN.com. Now, an easier way to study the Bible and grow in your faith. Highlight your favorite verse. Read separate versions at a glance. Click and read a commentary. Or cross-reference your favorite verse using the Strong's Concordance. All the right tools to study the Bible, all in one place. The CBN Bible, available at cbn.com/Bible or the iTunes App Store.